Chair Gallagher will begin in 1 minute. Okay, it's time. Chair Gallagher, you're live.
Good evening. That's the first time I've said that in a board meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're going to call to order this meeting of the Napa County Board of Supervisors, June 10th, 2024. Can I have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Cottrell?
Here.
Supervisor Ramos?
Here.
Supervisor Pedrosa? Here. Supervisor Gregory?
Here.
Chair Gallagher?
Here. I would like to ask our treasurer, Bob Minahan, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Before we move on, I just wanted to make a few talking points. Thank you so much for everyone joining us tonight for this special budget meeting. I want to tell you a little bit about something that we're launching tonight. It's part of our ongoing effort to make our meetings more accessible and to welcome everyone into our public process. We are going to be offering live Spanish translation starting tonight at all of our Board of Supervisors meetings. We will have staff in the room who are available to translate public comment. Tonight we're launching the Wordly AI language translation platform, which will be providing live translations during our meetings. This platform uses advanced AI technology to offer real-time translation, allowing attendees to listen to or read the proceedings in Spanish. For those joining us in person, you will need your own device and earphones to listen to or read the translation. For those joining virtually, you can listen to and read the live transcript of the meeting in Spanish via Zoom. We will also have meeting agendas available in Spanish. Okay, well, I'm going to have Daniel Sanchez. Thank you, Daniel. Repeat what I just said in Spanish. Thank you.
Is that on? Okay. Buenas tardes, gracias por estar aquí esta noche en esta junta especial sobre el presupuesto para el año fiscal 2024-25. Estoy encantado de compartir algunas noticias que subrayan nuestro compromiso con la accesibilidad y el incluso en el condado de Napa. Como parte de nuestros esfuerzos para hacer nuestras juntas más accesibles, me complace anunciar que a partir de esa noche vamos a ofrecer traducción en español en vivo y en todas las reuniones de la Junta de Supervisores. Esta iniciativa tiene como objetivo garantizar que nuestros residentes que hablan español pueden participar en el proceso democrático y hacer oír su voz. Siempre tenemos personas en la sala de juntas que están disponibles para traducir los comentarios del público si es necesario. Esta noche lanzamos el plataforma de traducción de idiomas Wordly AI, que proporcionará traducir en vivo durante nuestra junta. Wordly utiliza tecnología avanzada de inteligencia artificial para ofrecer traducciones en tiempo real, permitiendo que los asistentes escuchar o leer las actas en español. Para aquellos que asisten en la junta en persona, debían traer su propio dispositivo y autofones para escuchar o leer la traducción. Para quienes asisten virtualmente, pueden escuchar y leer la transcripción en vivo de la junta en español a través de Zoom. Las instrucciones para la agenda en español está disponible en el web countyofnapa.org/español-bos. Creemos que toda nuestra comunidad deben de tener la oportunidad de participar en el gobierno local sin importar las barreras de idioma. Esta iniciativa es solo una de las muchas maneras en que estamos trabajando para mantener los valores de inclusión y accesible de nuestro condado. Si tienen preguntas sobre cómo escuchar o ver en español, puede por favor hablar, háganmelo saber. Estaré sentada atrás de la sala y ahora vamos a proceder con nuestra junta especial del propuesto para el año fiscal 2024-2025. Gracias.
Thank you, Daniel. We're going to go ahead and move on with our agenda. We do not have a pet of the week. That will be tomorrow, so come back if you'd like to check out the pet of the week. And no proclamations and commendations tonight. We do not have any. We do not have a consent calendar for special districts, nor do we have a regular consent calendar. We are on item 7, public comment, and this is for all matters that are within the jurisdiction of the board but are not on the agenda for tonight. So we are going to be reviewing our recommended budget tonight. So if you have comments that are not related to the budget, please feel free to come to the podium and share your comments. Okay, all right. And Ms. Hoskins, do we have anybody on the phone?
No one on the line.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 8, which is Board of Supervisors reports and announcements. All right, I have one. If I can get my things working here. All right, I would just like to announce that we are going to adjourn tonight's meeting in the memory of the legendary winemaker Warren Winiarski. In addition to being the founder of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars and the winner of the Judgment of Paris blind tasting in 1973, Warren oversaw the Winiarski Family Foundation, which funded many important causes, including the Land Trust of Napa County, the Open Space District, the Jack L. Davies Ag Preservation Fund, and very close to his heart, the Scholarship and Mentoring Organization, If Given a Chance. Mr. Winiarski was among the original promoters of the Napa Ag Preserve, Measure J, and its extension, Measure P. His sites were ever trained on protecting agriculture, the natural environment, and building a sustainable Napa County. Many had the opportunity to know Warren and his wife, Barbara, as they were truly Napa Valley icons. Tonight, we offer our sincere condolences to Warren's immediate and extended family, as well as everyone who shared in his life and work, which made such a positive, lasting impact on our community and beyond. All right, thank you. Okay. We are now to, we have no items 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We are on to item number 13, public hearings. This is a public hearing to accept testimony on the fiscal year 2024-25 recommended budget. And so I am opening the public hearing officially, and we're going to the CEO, and our CEO, Mr. Alsop, will get us started. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Andrew, would you mind going into our conference room in there and getting as many chairs as you can to put them along the wall for Ms. Anderson and other people who are, thank you. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm pleased to present the fiscal year 2024-25 recommended budget for your consideration, which represents a balanced and responsible approach to managing the finances of this county while continuing to deliver essential services and make critical investments in our residents' quality of life and future. I want to welcome members of the public here tonight. This is our first time doing this, I think. So welcome. Our department heads are here, including elected department heads, and they're here tonight, and I want to thank them for their leadership and assistance and support. And a big thank you to our staff in the CEO's office, led by Ms. Craig, who's at the table here, and all of our budget team here in the first row for their work leading to tonight. I also want to say that we do these budget meetings in June. It's the end of the fiscal year, but we are a very accessible and open county. I've learned that in the 10 months I've been here. It's really small enough to have some interaction. So I would encourage all of you who are here tonight, that may be here tonight, to ask for certain things in the budget. You want to see certain things in the budget. At least from a staff perspective, my office is always open to you. I'm willing to take any meeting from any of you on any subject matter related to the budget, good or bad. So I would like to invite you to take advantage of that. In addition, certainly this meeting is for you tonight as well, but it's not the only time that you can talk to us about the budget. Our recommended budget reflects your board's directives, adopted policies and priorities, demonstrating a thoughtful practice of smart fiscal planning and focus on our general fund's long-term sustainability. This budget prepares for the potential loss of tens of millions of dollars in annual vehicle license fee revenue. It's about $30 million annually that we are slated to lose unless the state of California gets on the ball, mainly the Department of Finance and the legislature, to fix the problem. It is a complicated, in-the-weeds discrepancy in the education code, the state. This is all 100% discretionary revenue. It's a $30 million hit to this county. It's about a $50 million hit countywide to other jurisdictions. So it is a very big deal, and I would be derelict if I weren't preparing for that and being cautious about it. But that is a dark storm cloud out on the horizon, and we've got to get that fixed, and I appreciate all of the help and support from our treasurer, tax collector, and our auditor control and all their leadership working with the state on that. This budget also thoughtfully considers the heavy upfront financial commitment that's required of us and our general fund over the next 3 years for reimbursement under the recently awarded Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities grant. We have to come up with $50 million upfront out of our general fund. We're going to get reimbursed for that, and we're hopeful that that's going to be a good relationship with FEMA, but that's a big lift for us, and it's important that we all understand that and we plan for it. This budget also carefully contemplates our endeavor to refurbish and replace our major county facilities, as well as keep pace with the important compensation needs of our county's workforce in the coming years. It also recognizes the state of California's massive multi-year structural deficit that will, with time, unless unaddressed, begin to strain important social service programs that we provide as a political subdivision of the state, making sure all those mandated programs are done at the local level. Importantly, the FY 24-25 recommended budget does not rely on one-time resources for ongoing costs, and it sets aside tens of millions of dollars in funding to address all of those future obligations and realities and challenges that I just walked through. However, it also funds the largest investment in wildfire resilience in this county's history. The FY 24-25 recommended budget provides a total of $21 million for critical wildfire preparedness work throughout the county, with $15 million of that total in new investment. The county's total general fund contribution in this next fiscal year is $16 million, going to wildfire planning and projects, including appropriations of over $9 million to implement the first phase of the BRIC grant, which I just described. Additionally, this budget allocates considerable funding for our fire department, including drawing down about $5 million in one-time revenue to purchase new fire engines, vehicles, and necessary protective equipment to ensure the safety of our residents and our firefighters alike. This recommended budget continues your board's long-standing commitment to working families and vulnerable adults through millions of dollars in investment in affordable accessory dwelling unit development, which we're an award winner for nationally recently. You'll hear more about that later. Workforce down payment assistance and new rental assistance programming focused on increasing housing security among extremely low-income older adults. This budget provides $4 million to support the creation of approximately 80 to 100 additional affordable ADUs, over $2 million to support 20 to 30 working families who otherwise could not afford to buy homes. This budget also implements a new older adult rental assistance program designed to safeguard the county's rapidly growing homeless senior population by offering rental assistance to low-income seniors. It's a $5 million program that's allocated in this budget. This budget builds on your board's investment in road infrastructure over the last 3 years, which has resulted in over 100 miles of refreshed roadways, greatly improving travel across the county. 2 complete bridge replacements are also underway, along with repairs to 8 other bridges. The construction has commenced for 1 traffic calming roundabout at Soskel Ferry in Devlin. And we are working on a 5-year capital improvement plan, which is new. It's currently being developed, and that will be our comprehensive plan for the future for our not only our road infrastructure investment, but also for facilities and equipment and other technologies that are needed by the county. This budget funds significant compensation increase for 1,500 registered IHSS providers in Napa County who provide essential care to older adults and individuals with disabilities in our county. This wage increase, which is paid for out of the county's general fund, elevates the hourly rate of pay for these workers, providing one of the highest levels of compensation for IHS workers in all 58 counties in California. The agreement with SEIU 2015 is effective through June 30, 2027, with a total investment of nearly $20 million over the next 3 years. Napa County is set to purchase Skyline Wilderness Park, an 850-acre wilderness area which has been a jewel of the community for generations, I'm told. It is a jewel. Purchasing Skyline Park not only safeguards the park's continued use for open space, but importantly, guarantees local control over the park's recreational and environmental benefits in perpetuity. This budget designates $8 million out of our general fund for that purchase. This budget marks the final allocations for the new jail facility, the single largest infrastructure project undertaken by the county to date. State-of-the-art facility will open in 2025, enhance programming, behavioral health, and medical services, many of which are mandated, intended to reduce recidivism and improve community safety. The improved facility, spacing, and programming will increase general fund staff and operating costs an additional $5 million annually. Napa County endeavors to be a model of excellence in managing our workforce, keeping pace with the compensation requirements necessary to compete for, recruit, and retain the most qualified and talented employees, an essential practice that ensures the highest quality of service delivery for our county's residents. Tomorrow, your board will consider a tentative agreement that was recently ratified by the members of the county's largest employee bargaining unit, SEIU. This budget recommendation allocates funding for a cost of living adjustment for all of our employees this next fiscal year, totaling approximately $7 million. These highlighted items represent considerable discretionary investment from our county's general fund, both this next fiscal year and beyond, and must be considered in the broader context of additional needs, priorities, and commitments of funding. With that said, my office remains steadfast in our commitment to enacting a budget that fulfills the county's legal obligations and your board's strategic direction and priorities. And as always, and I'll say it again, we encourage members of the public to participate with us year-round in discussions that will help shape our county's final adopted budget, which we do each year this month. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Becky to go through some particular areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Craig.
Yes. Good evening, Chair and Supervisors. We have a slide presentation. There we go. And we have identified the information that we feel provides you some highlights and information on this budget without going into great detail, because that is volumes of information, but we are available to answer questions on any of it as available either today or at any time. It is going to be me and the budget team, which includes John Buzelich, Daniel Sanchez, Jasmine Elo, Celeste Gonzalez, and myself, available to do the presentation as well as answer any questions, and we will make ourselves available throughout this item. We are going to go through with this agenda. Economic conditions are going to be highlighted. We're going to then spend a moment to recognize the accomplishments that have been focused this prior year as well as are still in process, the priorities for next year, provide an overview of how the book is formatted since it is drastically different than it has been in previous years. Then we're going to dive into the departmental operations, personnel, capital, and then the transfers and reserves before we then open it up for board discussion and public comment. Daniel will be presenting first.
So our main source of discretionary general fund is, of course, property taxes. We're fortunate that property taxes are stable and growing. The growth is modest but positive and continue to move in the right direction. The other important discretionary revenue source, TOT, hotel tax, transient occupancy tax, and sales tax. Both of these, due to market conditions, we're seeing expecting some slowdown in the coming fiscal year. New in the budget book is a section called the community profile. This section has a very telling graph that notes our top 10 property tax payers. 7 of those top 10 property taxpayers are in the wine industry. And I suspect that if you were to expand that list to the top 50 taxpayers, you'd also see that many of those taxpayers are in that same industry as well. And when looking at our main sales tax data, most of the businesses that generate most of our sales tax in the county are also connected to the wine industry. As our CEO mentioned, a big area of concern is the potential loss of vehicle license fee. You'll hear a lot more of that, but we've given ourselves a little bit more flexibility from the budget guidelines that the board adopted some months ago, but it is, of course, not a substitute for that enormous amount of funds that we stand to potentially lose. Again, in the budget is also funding for emergency preparedness, for fire, for brick, and a significant amount of funding for capital improvements to fire as well for new engines. Lastly, an area of concern here is potential, due to the state's budget deficit, potential reductions in state programs, and should the state make significant reductions, that is something that we'll be working with our department heads and may return to the board at that time should we experience significant reductions in state funding for vital programs.
Next, Jasmine is going to provide an overview of the accomplishments.
Hi, good evening, Chair Gallagher and members of the board. Jasmine Elo, Management Analyst with the CEO Office. I'll be the accomplishments from fiscal year 23 to 24. We've County solicitation for a master architect to design all of the facilities. We've adopted 3 groundwater implementation work plans, which, along with well monitoring, are the foundation to bringing the subbasin into a sustainable condition by voluntary action of groundwater users. The demolition of the old airport terminal to allow for the new construction, which is currently in progress. As mentioned, we've been awarded the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC grant, for fire hazard mitigation efforts. We are currently in phase 1, which is a planning stage. Within the period of 0 to 14 months, we would then be entering into phase 2 for the implementation after. We've modernized the volunteer firefighter program to support volunteers, approved housing and safety elements. The Health and Human Services Agency has completed their behavioral health reorganization. And we have sold Calistoga Fairgrounds. We've also adopted 2 multi-year labor agreements and initiated a big data software platform for cross-departmental data integration. And the following 3 items are still in progress, and so the plan is to return to the board with additional updates in the summer. These are that we've requested a housing needs assessment for both affordable housing and the farm worker housing, updated the continuity of operations plan, and fire services model study.
So in addition to those that are still in process, we have identified the following priorities, which are where the focus of the funding is this year, and that is to protect the vehicle licensing fees for the county, the cities, and the town, to enhance our fire response and prevention, improve roads and facilities infrastructure, thank you. Acquire both Skyline Park and the reentry facility from the state of California. Initiate the general plan update. Next slide, please. As well as develop the regional climate action plan, prepare for the BAFA bond issuance if successful on the ballot, transfer jail operations to the new facility, implement care court, and develop the emergency recovery plan. There are many other activities that are baked into this budget, but those are the priorities that we've heard from your board that we have identified for funding. The actual budget book, it is available online on the CEO's webpage as the recommended budget book. It is available in print here in the CEO's office for anyone who wants to see it. And it is in a drastically new format. It also grew by about 100 pages. It is based on the Government Finance Officers Association's recommended presentation of budget information, and it is laid out primarily on a fund basis. But it also has a lot of supplemental data in it that is to provide the user visuals and or supplemental understanding. So it includes the community profile that has been mentioned that provides a lot of good data on the county itself, as well as the priorities and accomplishments within the individual departments, along with their performance measures. So that is new information in there with the performance measures for each and every department for the board to understand where the services are being done and to what level. That will also be further developed year over year with each of our departments. There's also information that isn't in here yet that is a goal to incorporate in future years, and that is a strategic plan and a 5-year capital outlay plan. So those will be brought back to you later this fall and would then be incorporated in future years. The book lays out, as I mentioned, in fund format, and it starts with the governmental funds. Those are the general core services and activities that are laid out in the one general fund, the multiple special revenue funds, the capital improvements fund, and the debt service fund. And then proprietary funds are considered more business-like, and they have a different purpose. There are some proprietary funds that are internal in nature that support the individual departments, as well as then the enterprise funds, which are outward-facing that support clients such as the animal shelter and the airport. In addition to those funds, which is where we will spend the majority of this presentation, there are non-operating special revenue funds. There are about 80 of them that are restricted in nature. They are in here to explain what funds are in here and their intended purpose, but we are not going to go into detail because they incorporate into transfers into all of the other operation funds. The special districts are also included in this book, but will be presented tomorrow at 2 p.m. with their own public hearings. In addition, there are schedules that are prepared by the auditor controller that go to the state controller's office, and those are presented in here, as well as the changes to personnel, physician control, and the capital requests. And with that, John?
There we go. Sorry, start over. Good evening, Chair Gallagher, members of the Board of Supervisors, John Buzlovich, Deputy CEO for Administration. This slide touches on the all funds budget, reflecting a total recommended appropriation of $951 million. It's an increase of $270 million over the '24 adopted budget. The categories displayed are by the types of funds that we have described so far in the introduction. The general fund being the most flexible area of the county. The operating special revenue funds being some of our larger departments with a high percentage of funding from external sources that are restricted to their purposes. The non-operating special revenue funds, which are for a very defined purpose and flow through into one of our county departments, and then a number of other funds that we've touched on. Some of the highlights of the increases, specifically in the general fund, are related to cost of living increases tied to our labor agreements, rising costs on the internal service funds, which are key administrative services, the operation of the new jail facility, transfers to fire, and transfers to our capital outlay anticipations. We'll have a separate slide on each of these funding categories, but one that I wanted to call attention to on this slide was the debt service fund. We can see a significant reduction there, and this is related to the 2014 certificates of participation are ending this month, June 2024, and 2012 bonds will be ending in 2028. Next slide. As Becky had touched on, the enterprise funds are funds that act in essentially a somewhat of a business-like capacity. For the county, our enterprise funds are the 5th Street parking garage, the airport, the animal shelter, Calistoga Fairgrounds, and the Lake Berryessa concessions. The 5th Street parking garage has seen some significant increases, largely related to the cost of insurance and utilities to operate the facility. The animal shelter is in its final year of agreement this coming year with our cities and town, so that will be looked at for participation. And the Calistoga Fairgrounds has been discussed recently in terms of a sale process transferring to City of Calistoga. And the funding included here is approximately 6 months of operations just to run out that enterprise to facilitate the transition. Internal service funds represent key services internal to the county. These are services that one department essentially provides to another so that they can fulfill their mission in serving the public. The county internal service funds include fleet, information technology services, property management, the employee and retiree benefits, and liability insurance premiums and claims. Some of the significant changes in these areas in information technology, we have increased costs on contracted services as well as increased staff costs, and specifically in the other post-employment benefit category, commonly abbreviated as OPEB. For employee and retiree benefits, we have a big increase or big change as a result of recognition of revenues from the departments into that budget area. Previously, the monies coming in had been netted out against the expenditure costs. So the change looks significant on paper, but the actual operation is essentially the same. And then on liability insurance, we have higher general liability and property insurance cost increases with some specificity on public safety costs being on the rise. One key thing on the internal service funds to recognize too is that these charges are then transferred and applied against all of our operating departments. And so it has a significant inflationary type effect on the grand total of our budget. So just the internal service funds has essentially a duplicated cost of $172 million that's reflected in our departments. Next slide. Capital Improvement Fund. This is where we have expenditures for major repairs and acquisitions. So we have facilities, the Skyline Wilderness Park, which our CEO had mentioned. We have $8 million in the recommended budget towards that purpose. Purchase of the re-entry facility, we have $16 million towards that effort. And specific to the facilities, we have a number of accessibility ADA efforts, a roof repair replacement, and some HVAC expenditures are in there. The completion of the jail construction project is one of the largest changes in that area. Special revenue funds include some of our sizable departments, and again, these are restricted fundings for the purpose of the missions of those departments. They include the Health and Human Services Agency, the library, our homeless services, roads, affordable housing, fire, building and code enforcement, and child support services. Each of these departments have significant costs following some of the same similar themes related to the cost of living increases, staffing changes, and provider contract agreement cost increases. The non-operating special revenue funds are monies that are tied to a very specific purpose, where the charge or the funds flow from the non-operating funds into one of our departments for the purposes of their operations. And again, this flow of money is reflected as an expense in a non-operating special revenue fund, becoming a revenue for the department operations, which then results in essentially a duplication of the numbers. And so there's approximately $63 million in duplicated gross costs if you look at this transfers of monies.
Thank you, John. We're going to be moving into the general fund with Daniel Sanchez.
The general fund's recommended beginning fund balance is $56 million. That's in the middle column under the recommended budget. So if you add this amount to the amount in taxes and departmental revenue, that would give you a total financing source of $347 million. And then the recommended appropriations amount is $323 million, and we're recommending using funds from tobacco settlement and community investment as well. If you take the total financing sources of $347 million subtracted by the total financing uses, I know it's a mouthful of $321 million, then that gives you $26 million, which is the fiscal uncertainty amount. That's a set aside that we use in case of some kind of fiscal emergency. And we'll see that in a later slide as well. So the general fund revenues are $291 million. 65%, the majority of that is from taxes, and the majority of that amount is $206 million. And this is really the county's discretionary amount. A lot of this, though, is already committed to core county services. So even though it's discretionary, it's funds that have been committed already for things like employee salaries or general fund transfers to the other agencies that John mentioned a bit ago. Intergovernmental charges are revenues that are mostly from the state or federal funds. Other financing sources are transfers in, and charges for services are mostly fees. The total general fund expenditures are $324 million. The majority of this is employee costs. We are a service providing organization, and that means our people. These costs are particularly felt in our public safety departments, such as sheriff and corrections, because those departments need to operate 24/7. They never close. Other financing uses are transfers out to other departments, such as to fire or the Health and Human Services Agency.
Thank you. Now Celeste will provide an overview of the departments.
Hi, good evening, Chair Gallagher and members of the board. I'll be giving you a breakdown of the departments within the general fund, starting with general administration and finance. So you'll notice that the Board of Supervisors budget increased, and that was mainly due to staffing. So the board staff assistants were previously in the county executive office, and they are now in the Board of Supervisors. We also have a recommended additional board staff assistant. We've also increased the Board of Supervisors budget to include district funds, a sum that each supervisor will be able to use for their own district. You'll also note that central services is being moved to CEO, which includes community outreach and purchasing. And as you know, non-departmental is where tax revenues and transfers reside. A presentation was made for the use of tobacco settlement in the last Board of Supervisors meeting. And then lastly, we have the auditor controller and the treasurer tax collectors. They are our finance heroes. And for general administration, we also include the assessor, recorder, county clerk, and elections, who will be having a very busy year with the November presidential election. And lastly, we have county council, who is always here to help us out. For the next slide, for community resources, we have Public Works, the Agricultural Commissioner, the UC Cooperative Extension, and Planning, Building, and Environmental Services departments. And they are currently programming a general plan update. A fee study is also underway, and the findings and any recommendations will be presented to the board towards the end of summer and could possibly increase revenues. Next slide, please. For our law and justice departments, district attorney, public defender, conflict public defender, and probation. Please note that with the recent series of homicides in Napa, the resources for the district attorney, sheriff, and public defender are being strained. Although it's hard to quantify now, those departments may need more funding at mid-year or maybe even earlier to keep up with the added workload. And lastly, our public service folks, the sheriff and corrections, you'll also notice an increase in funding, but that is going towards operations for the new jail and personnel. So that brings us to our recommended personnel changes that Becky will tell you more about. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. So starting off this fiscal year, we have just shy of 1,630 FTE. The changes that have been made during the fiscal year bring it up to 1,630 FTE. And this year, we are making very minor recommendation of changes to adds and deletes of a net total of just under 11. And that is less than 1% of the workforce. It is very strategic in only a few areas where the demands have been identified and would result in a net count of 1,640.58. And that information is found in more detail on page 545 by position, if there are any questions. Further, the capital outlay schedules identify not only the equipment that is being requested in the departments primarily for replacement purposes, but there are a few new pieces, and those total just shy of $10 million, in addition to the many capital projects that are in process with a recommendation of at least $100 million in rollover and just $1.1 million in new funding. And that is also then found on page 552. Transfers out. As we have mentioned, John mentioned, not only in the internal service funds, but in the non-operating special revenue funds. The general fund also has duplication of expenditures totaling approximately $75 million, which are the general fund's commitments to the other funds' operations. And that is to Health and Human Services, the Fire Department, Capital Improvements, Roads, Homeless Services, and the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And those total approximately $75 million. And in total, the duplication is approximately $350 million. So while we have a $950 million budget presented, about $350 million of it is duplication and results in about a $600 million net budget. The general fund's fund balance is approximately $184 million projected at the end of, at the June 30th, with it designated between the reserves as required in the budget policy, as well as a variety of other measures, including fiscal uncertainty, some reservations for previous grant reimbursements, the tobacco master settlement, and those reservations and assignments all total $84 million, plus the reserves. So when you get down to the end of it, it left available balance of $56 million, which is what we showed you as the beginning available fund balance for the general fund. The draw on that will then result in approximately $26 million of available fund balance that will still be available for the board to have as rainy day funds to address future obligations such as the VLF shortfall, the facilities needs, BRIC, and anything else that arises unknown. So. Okay, thank you. So with that, we do want to, again, thank the department heads, all of who are here, and their budgetary staff who were able to make the recommendations and provide the substantial supporting information that is provided in the narrative within this book in each and every department. The Auditor Controller's Office for the preparation of the state controller's schedules, Human Resources for their assistance in all of the analysis on the personnel position requests, ITS for their continued support with the software. This was a new software called Gravity. We built it and learned it while we were building this book, and it was quite an experience. And we know that there's still a few corrections that we don't understand in how the software prepares the book and or how it's presented, and we are going to work on that before we present the final adopted budget later this summer. And the whole county executive's office for their continued support. At this time, we would ask the board members to provide your questions, open up for public comment, provide us any direction, but to please continue the public hearing till tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Thank you, Ms. Craig. Thank you so much to you and the whole budget team and to all the department heads. I know this is year-round work, and the public has just seen a very little bit of what this looks like. So thank you so much to you and everyone for the work, and really a very different but much improved budget book. And I'm going to just see if the board have any questions before we open for public comment. Supervisor Ramos.
Thank you. I do have questions. I would just ask kind of what the chair, how Chair Gallagher, you would like us to proceed, if you want to go through section by section, or do you want to go by fund? Do you want to go by page number?
I'm going to ask Ms. Craig how she would maybe prefer to go through it in terms of questions.
Right. I think supervisor by supervisor would be beneficial, and then if you could provide the page number in the book or from the slide, then we can reference that for providing further information.
Okay. I did not even I took notes and I didn't even know on the slide. So that's going to be a little tough, but I'd be happy to start.
Please.
That's, okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. First of all, starting to the staff, this is an incredible lift. And while I'm not appreciative of the extra 100 pages, I understand that really what this does do is give us a far more clear picture. And I think, the objective here is just that the investments that we are making are truly historic, and they are measured and strategic at the same time. And so a few of my questions that I have are mostly in hopes of making sure that the narratives that are attached to it really do show those investments and are clearly reflecting the conscious decisions that this board has made. So I will start with the first one, which was explained a little bit better, but just so that I understand, page 19, I'm looking at the internal service funds, and the internal service funds have had the largest change from fiscal year over. And so my understanding of that is that the largest portion is for the accounting reflection of the fully loaded health insurance costs that were previously netted out and not reflected in the budget. Am I correct there?
That is correct.
Wow, we're 1 for 1. Thank you so much. The next one, airport. I'm on page 20, and I've also referring to pages 460 and 462 on the actual fund. So one of the things that I do see on page 20 that I am hopeful that we can add additional narrative on the significant changes is that's the largest increase of the total of the enterprise funds is the airport, and while it percentage-wise it's not a large increase for the airport fund itself, it doesn't say what that additional appropriation funds increase was for. So I'm hopeful that either we can have clarification and include that. But when I do go to page 460 and 462 on the airport, there is a use of fund balance on the airport of 1.236 million. And I think I've said this in years prior, if we are using fund balance, I think it is really important to line that up with what priorities have been established for using that fund balance. So if there is someone on hand that can explain the use of that fund balance, is it tied to the finishing of the terminal redevelopment? Is it tied to management of the construction? There is no matching narrative that explains why we are using fund balance. And given that the airport is an enterprise fund and should be really accounting for the ins and the outs altogether, I certainly would appreciate having a little bit more description on the airport. The next one is on page 21. And this is internal service funds. And this one, no matter how many times you say it, it really does throw me for a loop that these are double counted funds because they're coming from one division out to another and they overinflate. So yes, it looks like a $600 million budget, but it really isn't because we are moving money over and yet accounting for it all in aggregate. But when I look at the bullet point on OPEB, how I'm understanding this is the discussions that we have when we look at our actuarials of how PERS, our public employee system, how they do their math and they deliver the message of their math late. Is that what this is, what this category and this bullet point is explaining, and how we're going to rectify this?
This is based on an actuarial report that provides us the projection of how much is necessary, and this is based on that actuarial report.
And that's the actuarial report that when we review it, it is 2 years behind.
Always,
correct?
Yeah. It's being prepared right now based on 2-year-old data. Yep.
So I see a recommendation here that's coming up. Policy is going to be proposed to direct the use of the funds. Can you explain? We're going to be making a transfer out and using these trust funds. Why are we going to be doing that?
So many years now, the board has been setting aside funds into a 115 trust to help buy down or offset its liability. And those funds have been accumulating, and they now exceed what the actuarial's projected liability is. So we in fact have 100% funded the OPEB liability, but we have not chosen to tap that trust fund yet. And so we are continuing to pay future liability obligations out of our operations. So we are doing research and preparing a draft policy to bring to the board to make a recommendation that now that it is overfunded, to start utilizing those funds to make those future payments. And that will come back to the board when the next study is available.
Perfect. Thank you. The next one is on page 24 and pages 298. And I had this conversation with the CEO, so I'll just share it with my colleagues. It's in regards to the BRIC grant. And one of the things that I really would like us to delineate, on page 24, it does say that $9 million is the county match for the grant. And so I think it's really important for us as we go forward to separate out what is a BRIC grant match, what is a BRIC grant advance, versus what is a general fund contribution that this board makes above and beyond the requirements of the BRIC grant. Because we are in fact doing that. And I think that that's a really important message to send to the community, that we have heard that as a priority, and we are continuing to make that a priority. But I think instead of lumping everything together, I do believe that we need to look separately at match versus advance versus general fund unrestricted contribution that we have made in addition to that. The next one, I will say, and this is me trying to, we made a change in our budget policies earlier this year where we removed the requirement for the fiscal uncertainty. But it's still here. So a couple of things I would ask. One, if we removed it, why do we still have it listed as fiscal uncertainty as opposed to moving it into general reserves and having our budget policy and our budget book align?
While it's not a requirement of the budget policy, we do still recommend it at this time due to primarily the VLF uncertainty. So we have chosen to recommend it continue as that designation, but it's the board's discretion if you would like it moved to an undesignated available fund balance. But it is the CEO's office recommendation to continue reserving it at this time, or designating it at this time.
Okay, so when I do look at these funds as they are listed on page 29, I think. Okay, on page 29. And we look at our available fund balances, the general reserve, our greatest amount of flexibility on those funds, or is it the fiscal uncertainty has the greatest amount of flexibility?
In the list of restricted and assigned, fiscal uncertainty has the most discretion. What is full discretionary is the available fund balance, which on here started at 56 million before the recommendations, which now draws that down to 26 million also.
So in the introduction, when you had talked and we were on the slide of the fund balance and that we project that we will be ending with the 56 million, the statement was made that is can in fact be used for VLF shortfall. So if that's the case, then why are we also keeping this here and not moving to general reserves?
Because there's going to be 2 years of shortfall and it's 30 million a year. So we know that there's a larger need than a one-time. And so we still feel that there's a concern for that need. And again, VLF is only one of those demands. BRIC is another one, as well as facilities and staff salaries.
And so then my next question goes to when we look at page 37 and the budget policy guidelines, it says that the general reserve balance is equivalent to 15% of the combined operational appropriations for the general fund and the health and human services fund. But when I look at the combined health and human services fund with the general fund, I'm not getting to 15%. So my question is, how are we calculating that? And the next one being, I guess I'm still left with a little discomfort of we made a decision to remove fiscal uncertainty, yet we're still using it. And so it would seem with the 4/5 vote, we can move something out if we have a situation in which we need to move money. And if we want to have this here, then I've said this before. I said this last year. Why don't we call it our VLF shortfall? Why don't we send the message to the state of California, like we are counting on these funds, that we need these funds to actually provide these essential county services. I'm just sitting with some discomfort here that we said, yes, we're good with removing fiscal uncertainty, but then it makes it seem by including it that we may have prematurely removed fiscal uncertainty. So I just leave that for a discussion for us to have in terms of what message are we sending as we do that. My next question is in page 64 on housing and homeless services. There was a significant change on salary and employees, and it says that it's because there were 3 new positions added. And it says that this is in anticipation of the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority's bond that we are definitely working the bookends here, definitely working to make that happen in November. But my question is, were these limited term positions?
They are not. Those were added this year with board action, and they were permanent FTE.
So my next question is, and I did not see them on the limited term schedule, and so my question is, why are we doing that when we don't have guarantees of these bond measures? And even with the $5 million allocation for the senior rental stabilization, that has a sunset date. When I look at even our staff at BAFA, our BAFA staff is limited term. So how are we going to support those continued employees on a permanent basis without a secured funding source or knowledge of that funding source until November?
Right. So they are currently supported by the general fund in preparation of those future programs and or the new pilot program. If and when there is no funding available for them, we will work with HR to identify other places within the county for those positions, to those employees to be supported in other departments. But when we presented these positions to the board this year, it was determined that in order to be able to recruit and retain, we were going to need to do permanent positions and not limited term positions.
Okay. The next one, I did have a conversation with the sheriff about this one. It's pages 148. And that is, there was a significant change, and it was listed in the accomplishments, but I think it definitely warrants inclusion in the narrative of the significant adjustments, and that's that the sheriff's office took OES. That is it was a great move for us as an organization to be able to move emergency services within the public safety realm. And so I think that would be definitely something great to include in the significant adjustments. And then I had to have some help in understanding this one, and that's page 150. And I'm going to make two comments on this one, and that is the sheriff's office hired 2 building maintenance workers to do building maintenance around the sheriff's office. And that was that resulted in a decrease of $84,000 on an inter-service fund. That is a tremendous charge, and I definitely want, separate from this budget hearing, I want to understand that inter-service fund transfers and the cost to our departments. Because if you can realize this much savings by direct hiring into your department yourself, it just caused me pause that this is a savings for the Department of Sheriff and Coroner together. And then I went to the salary schedules, and then I started looking for, well, where these people live. They actually live inside the sheriff's office and not within the coroner's office. So the coroner's office, congratulations, you get a windfall on the hiring of these building maintenance workers. But I just wanted to say that number caused me pause. And I certainly want to understand, separate from these budget hearings, exactly what our departments are paying for. I understand we have generalized services that all the departments benefit from, whether it's from communications or from IT or liability or property management. Absolutely. But I do want to understand those a bit more. The next one I have is the jail on page 429. So my understanding and looking back at last year's budget is that we had fully appropriated for the jail, and all the money's there.
Yes.
And so when I look at page 429 on the appropriations for 24-25, there's $55 million appropriated there. But isn't that just a carryover that comes over from the schedule? Because the jail appears on page 556 in Schedule G, which has all of our carryovers. And on Schedule G, we have 4 items of carryover of jail replacement project, new jail offset, and jail transition project, which together make up that $55 million. So are we double counting?
So it is in the schedule in the back for disclosure of the projects. Why it is listed on here is to show you that those funds are encumbered and then not available in available fund balance for other projects. So it is purely just for reporting purposes to be able to reflect an accurate ending fund balance.
I guess I'm missing how that's not double counted if we have it in appropriations.
So again,
We appropriated last year.
we appropriate every year as a project comes forward, but we're wanting to reflect that there isn't $55 million sitting there in this fund available for other projects. So we wanted to report to the board that the fund balance is truly less, and that is the project. But we will ensure it's not double spent next year.
And it will also come forward on the carryover later when we do that. Was the August, September, when we do the carry forward, will it come again to us? That $55 million will come again to us on a carry forward?
That we will have to work with the auditor controller to determine how it would then need to be reflected now that it's available in here, reserving the funds.
Okay. Okay. that's, those are mine for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions that cannot wait until we have started public comment. Okay, thank you. I do want to get moving because I know you're all here and want to make sure that you get a chance to speak. I just want to warn everybody that we will probably take a very short comfort break at 7:30. So, but we will come back very quickly. So if you do have any comments on this agenda item, please feel free to queue up at the podium. Please make sure to state your name and then give your comment. Thank you. And we will be doing 3 minutes per person. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Nord-Kanegi. I am a retired teacher from NV, Napa Valley Unified School District, from Napa Valley Language Academy, and I am part of the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Steering Committee for Napa Valley Unified School District. And I also have an Equity and Inclusivity Council that I started. And so this is the first year 9th graders have done a pilot project for ethnic studies. It's now a state requirement. And so I am here, I don't know if anyone showed up of the students, to speak also on their behalf. We had a tea in the Napa High Library, and they would like to tell you what they think about Napa. And they think that it's a safe place. They really like it. They think as far as diversity, there's a lot of Caucasians and Latinx students and a little less diversity than in American Canyon. They think that housing is important so that the workers in Napa can also live in Napa. They also think that there are not very many things for young people to do, and they would like to have more opportunities, a Scandia here or other fun things to do. And they also think health and mental health is very important, that everyone has the opportunity to have seguranza, health insurance. And also, we're working a lot with the Mishawal Wapos and Patwin people to have education for people who have lived here for 10,000 years. And I would love to see the Board of Supervisors have a land acknowledgement. If that's possible, I start every one of my meetings in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Steering Committee meetings in Napa. I am so happy that you now have Spanish language translation, and I commend you for that. If you need any help with that, the Napa Valley Unified School District does an excellent job in that regard. And that is all. Thank you so much for your service. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Nord.
Hello, good evening. My name is Eve Khan. I have one question on the, under priorities, it says prepare for BAFA bond issue. But I don't have any idea of what that means. If it's successful, how much money are we getting? And if it fails, what's the impact? So those are my two questions related to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Supervisors and staff. My name is Michelle Gruppe. I'm with the Community Leaders Coalition. And on behalf of our members, I'd like to thank you for your ongoing commitment to improving access to the county budgeting process by hosting this evening hearing, providing Spanish interpretation, and for the outreach that you did to ensure all of our ability to participate tonight. This year's presentation of the budget was lovely and bravo, so much easier to follow, and actually includes some of the recommendations that the CLC would like to make for the staff and the board. Regarding the budget presentation, we'd like to recommend that there's perhaps an executive summary that's a little bit more approachable and digestible to the public. The budget and brief document is a really good template that you could perhaps use to summarize the priorities that are in the CEO letter and the budget book. We'd like to recommend that you move towards using an outcome-based accounting model as highlighted in the Government Finance Officers Association in terms of the best practices. That your budget should be a reflection of the county's values and aspirations, and as listed in the general plan or your strategic plan. And I do want to acknowledge that there was movement towards this approach with the addition of the accomplishments and goals in each department section this year. And then clarification on budget policies that outline how the staff and/or the board determine which reserve funds are used for deficits and which funds are added to when there are surpluses, whether they're unexpected or planned. With regard to educating and informing your constituents, I'd like to recommend developing and sharing a publicly accessible budget calendar. Again, the budget and brief document on the county website is a good first step on how the process works. Improvements to the budget timeline section would include adding more details about when decision-making points are happening throughout the year when there's surpluses and deficits. And then in terms of community engagement, the CLC would like to see a process that both educates key stakeholders in the community about how the budget is built and managed, as well as a more robust process for the staff and supervisors to solicit input from the residents. For example, how might the county staff build relationships with community-based organization leaderships that leverages resources and builds community capacity? Hosting public forums outside of these meetings that you have to allow for community input, like town halls, surveys in English and Spanish, and communications throughout the year about how the budget process works and how folks can get best engaged through your social media platforms and community events. San Diego County, San Francisco, Mendocino County, and Santa Clara County have some good examples of some kind of interactive opportunities that match those recommendations. And we understand that an effective engagement in the budget process is a long-term commitment, one which will require resources. The CLC would like to continue to work with you in effective engagement year over year. And I thank you again for your time and consideration of these requests.
Thank you, Ms. Groupie.
Good evening, Chair Gallagher and members of the board. My name is Kara Werner, and I have the pleasure of being the Executive Director of the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. We work to make biking safer, more convenient, and more accessible. And we thank you for this opportunity this evening to provide input. In reviewing the recommended budget, we found several mentions of the Vine Trail, which we greatly appreciate and support. However, otherwise, we saw fairly scant mention of bicycle facilities to be installed. The performance measures listed track streets resurfaced and potholes filled only, and we've asked staff to begin reporting each year on the miles of bike lanes installed, in addition to the miles of roads paved. We would like the budget to give a better sense of this too, and include what bike and pedestrian facilities are planned and where, in the same way that we can easily determine where, in the same way that we can easily determine where guardrails will be installed. We cannot simply refer to the county's adopted bike plan to learn this information, because the recommendations in the bike plan are, for various reasons, regularly not implemented. We would ask also that you consider dedicating funding for priority bike safety and connectivity projects, and that the CIP list or similar lists be developed with Vision Zero goals and connectivity in mind. Currently, aside from Class 1 paths like the Vine Trail, multimodal improvements are typically installed only when a road paving project is warranted. It's our understanding that those road projects are prioritized based on the pavement condition index, which is certainly important, but does not take into consideration the connectivity of the bicycle network or crash history. Without dedicating funding, key gaps in the bicycle network may not be addressed for years or even decades. Dedicated funding would also help ensure that protected bike lanes, similar to those you may have seen on the Imola Bridge, can be installed. Just those inexpensive flexi posts cut crash risk in half, according to a Federal Highway Administration study. So that's huge, and if you are looking for a quick and inexpensive method for significantly increasing safety for cyclists, simple vertical separators are an answer. I also just want to quickly thank the Director of Public Works, Steve Lederer, and his team for partnering with us so much this year. They've sent several rounds of design memos for our input and review, and we feel the collaboration has made the roads safer and is making them safer for vulnerable road users. So thank you for your time and your consideration of our requests, and we look forward to continuing to partner with the county.
Thank you, Ms. Vernon.
Hello, good evening. My name is Miguel Angel Castellan. I am the Napa Valley Co-Ed Director, Executive Director, and I'm here to give you a little information. We were established in 2016 and have become a non-profit independent 501c3 in 2022. We're active in all stages of disaster, from recovery, response, recovery, and mitigation and preparedness. We're currently working with the LISTOS program to provide preparedness, and also have our Meet Your Neighbor program that we provide workshops to the community to better have them prepare as individuals and also as a neighborhood to be more resilient. We've been active since we started in 2016, it seems like, on either fires, pandemic, all types of response, and we can do a mitigation program planning so that we can respond better every time. We currently are coordinating and facilitating 11 subcommittees with over 100 members, and most of our subcommittees are working during blue skies to help ensure community is ready for the next activation. I would like to thank Napa, the County of Napa, and the Office of Emergency Services for the ongoing partnership. Since July 2022, COED has received $25,000 annually from the county to support our subcommittee work, participating in meetings, and respond work. Based on our experiences in 2023 and 2024, analyzed costs for subcommittee response work has been approximately $102,000 per year, which does not include over $88,000 in-kind agency time. We are here to ask for $100,000 to continue our work as COED. All our previous disasters show that how important a public-private partnership has been for Napa County and COED. Sorry, I'm getting a little nervous. A strong interest in sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, a strong investment in COED will further help address community needs and all phases of disaster. COED is committed to being a strong partnership with Blue Sky Times and to help our most vulnerable populations to get prepared and get ready for the next disaster. I want to thank you for your time and also for your consideration with this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Georgina Enríquez y estoy aquí representando a mi comunidad y apoyando a COED. Trabajo como coordinadora del vecindario Abundance Center, que es parte de Napa Valley Community Housing. Sirvo a los residentes de Napa Valley Community Housing como también al vecindario. COED es una de las organizaciones más necesarias en nuestra comunidad. Como ustedes saben, vivimos en una área en que los desastres pueden suceder en cualquier momento. Necesitamos estar preparados y COED se dedica a eso. Nos educa y eso nos ayuda a ser una comunidad fuerte y resiliente. Para continuar con su labor, COED necesita un presupuesto digno. ¿Alguno de ustedes ha tomado los entrenamientos de preparación de desastres? ¿Saben en qué zona viven? Si quieren estar preparados, participen en uno de los entrenamientos de COED. Gracias por su tiempo y por darle a la comunidad latina la oportunidad de expresarse en su propio idioma.
Thank you. Can I get a Celeste or Daniel? Can you? I think we have a few Spanish speakers, so I want to make sure we are doing translation for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gina, and I'm here to represent my community and to support COED. Working as a coordinator in my community at Von Brandt Center? At Von Brandt Center, NVCHC.
Napa Valley Community Housing.
Okay, it's part of the Napa Valley Community Housing, and I help support the residents and the entire community. COED is one of the organizations that is the most necessary in our community. Like you guys know, we live in an area where disasters can happen at any moment. We need to be prepared, and COAD is dedicated to that. They educate us and they help us as a community to be more strong and resilient. And to continue with all the work that they're doing, COAD needs they need to be dignified, a dignified budget. Do any of you guys know what it takes to be prepared in a disaster? Do you know what zone you live in? Do you know if you're prepared? Participate in one of our trainings in COAD. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Giving us the opportunity.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you for giving us the time and the opportunity, and to our community for all of our.
To express ourselves
Okay,
in the
thank you for helping us express our language, and giving us that support.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No, está bien, gracias.
Buenas tardes a todos los presentes. Mi nombre es Francisca Durán. Yo soy un miembro de la comunidad. Yo vengo a dar mi experiencia y que sigan apoyando al programa COAD, en la cual para nosotros es muy importante estar capacitados en caso de una emergencia. En mi experiencia me ha servido toda la información que ellos nos brindan, como folletos para cómo registrarnos para las alertas, para saber sobre cómo llenar una hoja en contactos de emergencias, estar relacionados en cómo hacer un plan de preparación para una emergencia, y también cómo preparar una bolsa que tenga todo lo que es necesario en caso de una evacuación, ya sea un temblor, ya sea incendios. En mi experiencia me ha funcionado y me gusta seguir teniendo esta experiencia con ellos, y que la sigan teniendo a la comunidad para tener una comunidad más segura.
Thank you.
Le voy a hacer un resumen. ¿Por qué no? Okay. Okay. ¿Quieres que? Okay. De todo eso. A summary, because I don't have notes. Thank you for listening, and please continue to support COAD. The work that they do is very important in helping build resiliency in the communities and helping with emergency preparedness. They're helping to ensure that everybody has the proper alert systems, that everybody knows where they are in case of an emergency, and they're also helping to build a alert go bag, and they're helping you be more prepared for the event of any type of disaster. That was the gist.
Okay.
I'll take better notes.
Thank you.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Chair Joel Gallagher y miembros del comité de supervisores y miembros de la comunidad. Mi nombre es Linda Acevedo Benson, representando a Napa Community Health Initiative, CHI, y apoyando al subcomité de acceso lingüístico de Napa COAD. Hoy vengo en representación también del señor Pablo Satarín, de Fair Housing Napa Valley, y copresidente del subcomité de acceso lingüístico de Napa COAD. Estas son sus palabras y voy a estar dando unos comentarios también. Las barreras de acceso a la información, de recursos y oportunidades impactan a todos los aspectos de la vida de un individuo o familia de las comunidades latinas e indígenas de bajos recursos que habitan en el condado de Napa y que no tienen acceso a la información de recursos en su idioma. Durante emergencias pasadas, tanto a nivel local como en todo el país, se ha demostrado repetidamente que las comunidades vulnerables y de bajos ingresos se ven afectadas de manera desproporcionada por no tener acceso en su idioma a los procedimientos de evacuación, los centros de asistencia locales, cómo acceder a recursos vitales durante desastres naturales y emergencias o crisis nacionales. queremos enfatizar que el acceso lingüístico no solo se trata de proporcionar traducciones de documentos o servicios de interpretación. Las barreras de idioma pueden crear confusión si no están traducidas de una manera que la comunidad pueda entenderlas culturalmente. Esta confusión puede dejar a las personas sin información crucial que afectaría la vida de ellos y de sus familias. Por lo tanto, es importante para nuestra comunidad la inclusión lingüística y empoderar a la comunidad con su participación activa en los procesos de toma de decisiones que afectarán la vida de su comunidad para tener acceso equitativo a información y recursos independientemente de su origen lingüístico. Por eso, alentamos al Condado de Napa y le damos gracias por este espacio a priorizar iniciativas de acceso lingüístico que empoderen a las comunidades vulnerables. Esto incluye invertir en estrategias de comunicación multilingüe, proporcionando financiación para servicios de interpretación en vivo y traducción e involucrar activamente a los líderes, organizaciones comunitarias y a la comunidad en general, para cerrar la brecha entre los grupos lingüísticos. Napa Coat agradece trabajar con el Condado de Napa en esta capacidad y ofrece su asistencia y asociación en cualquier área que pueda promover el acceso lingüístico en este condado. Al priorizar el acceso al idioma, podemos promover la equidad y la inclusión en el Condado de Napa y también fortalecer la resiliencia de nuestras diversas comunidades durante tiempos de crisis. Gracias.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Gallagher, members of the board. My name is Linda Acevedo Benson. I'm representing Napa CHI, a subcommittee that is for accessible linguistics for Napa Co-Ed. Today I'm here representing Senor Pablo Zatarian from Fair Housing Napa and the co-president of the subcommittee for linguistic access for Napa Co-Ed. The barriers for information access for any type of help and opportunities that can impact everybody in every aspects of our life, and an individual or the family and the communities, Latinas or Indigenous, as well as the communities for lower income that live in the county of Napa and that don't have information or access to information in their language. During emergencies, a lot of local people vulnerable communities and communities that are lower income are often affected more because they do not have access in their own language, especially for evacuations or for any assistance centers or for any places where they can get help for natural disasters, emergencies, or national crises. They want to really strongly emphasize that this access to information in their own language is also important for for translation services, for documents, and also for services, for interpretation services that are needed. There are also some barriers that can cause confusion, like, for example, things that are translated, but they don't take into account cultural significance or any type of cultural linguistic differences between different countries or different nationalities. This confusion can cause people to miss valuable information, and it can affect their lives and their families. It's important that our community is inclusive in language and that it's supporting our community so that our community can participate actively in all of the processes that are happening in terms of decision making because it affects everybody's lives and it affects our community. Having access to information and can just help everybody when it's in their own language. We're asking that Napa prioritize incentives for accessible language for vulnerable communities. We are also asking that you invest in these strategies, so in communication that is multilingual, and we are also asking that you invest in interpretation services and translation services, not just here, but also in any meeting that you have, in any community organization that you might lead. Napa COAD is grateful to work with the county in this capacity, and they offer any assistance in any area to include access to language, more language services in the county of Napa. Prioritizing language accessibility, through that we can improve the quality of life, we can improve equality and inclusion in the county of Napa, and we can also fertilize the resilience from our diverse communities during times of crisis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to mention that after Mr. De Natale, we will take a break.
Yeah. Good evening, Chair Gallagher and the board and staff for all of your work and for hosting this meeting. I'm Julia Di Natale with Napa Valley Community Foundation. Some of you were at a public town hall we hosted about a year ago focused on best practices and transparency in the budgeting process. And we would like to thank you for the important improvements you have made in accessibility and transparency. Napa Valley Community Foundation is a public charity focused on supporting the residents of Napa County. In the most basic sense, one of our jobs is to lessen the burden of government by funding programs and projects that benefit the Valley's most vulnerable residents. In our history, we have distributed more than $100 million. That took us 30 years, and you get to that number much more quickly than we do. But we do provide at least $10 million in funding to support nonprofit programs each year, often working closely with the county to leverage these investments to support a nonprofit sector that is efficient, accountable, and trusted by the most vulnerable residents. One example of that is the ADU program, and another is the launch of the COAD, which was a result of bringing together our local nonprofit second responders and your staff after the 2014 earthquake to determine how collective response could be improved. We co-created an organization that would make communicating and collaborating more efficient and effective in times of disaster and in between disasters when so much important work can be done to prepare for the next one. We are so proud of what COAD has accomplished in these last 8 years. Just one example is its support of the Language Access Plan. We all know that an ongoing area of improvement every time we have a disaster is ensuring that all residents receive critical life-saving information in languages and modalities that will reach them. Since launching COAD in 2016, Napa Valley Community Foundation has invested more than $1 million, and we currently provide more than $100,000 a year to support it. These funds come from a dwindling disaster reserve that has to cover other costs after every disaster, particularly those that cannot be covered by government, like cash aid to undocumented workers or long-term rebuilding for uninsured. To ensure that we can be ready to provide this aid and to sustain COAD, it is critical that the county support COAD at an increased level as it can. Philanthropy is always a minority investor in nonprofit safety net programs, which derive between 1/2 and 2/3 of their yearly revenues from government grants and contracts. Our partnership with the County of Napa is particularly important in this next year, where local philanthropy and state funding is shifting and or facing reductions. Thank you again for your work, and we look forward to continued partnership.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Ligia Navarrete, soy coordinadora del Centro de Recursos de la Escuela McPherson y hoy estoy aquí como parte de la comunidad de Napa en la que vivo desde hace 21 años y en apoyo a COAD. En estos 21 años hemos tenido emergencias como terremotos, incendios, pandemia, apagones y quiero agradecer a COAD por crear grupos de enfoque para conocer nuestras necesidades como hispanohablantes.
Agradecemos que haya un sistema de anuncios de actividades o de emergencias que nos mantenga informados de todas las emergencias que mencioné e incluso también de cierres de carreteras. Sin embargo, creo que deben de mejorar. Tuve que inscribirme a los anuncios en inglés porque las traducciones no tenían mucho sentido. Han mejorado, sin embargo, creo que se puede hacer más. Quiero agradecer a COAD por hacer talleres de preparación de emergencia en español y también en estos grupos de enfoque que mencioné anteriormente pudimos dar nuestras opiniones sobre qué es realmente lo que son las necesidades en estos anuncios. Lo han mencionado antes, como que no se entiende dónde tendremos que ir en caso de una emergencia. Entonces eso es algo que nos gustaría que estuviera incluido. También quiero agradecer por ser parte de la comunidad y del equipo para cuando se necesita distribuir tarjetas para comprar alimentos en caso de apagones o alguna emergencia. Por último, quiero agradecer por sus esfuerzos en estas juntas para que sean inclusivas para la comunidad hispanohablante, por darnos la oportunidad de que nuestra voz y opiniones sean escuchadas y valoradas y tomadas en cuenta. I can do it in English if you want.
Okay.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon. My name is Ligia Navarrete. I'm the Family Resource Center Coordinator at McPherson Elementary. And today I'm here as part of Napa community in which I have lived for 21 years. And in support here for COAD. In these 21 years, we have all kinds of emergencies such as earthquakes, fires, pandemic blackouts. I want to thank CODA for creating focus group to learn our needs and opinions in our language and for the translations that we get. Unfortunately, we need to work on those. I had to subscribe in the English message because sometimes the translations in Spanish doesn't make sense. But I am still really thankful for God for doing emergency preparedness workshops in Spanish. And as I mentioned before in these focus groups, we were able to comment what are the needs of the Hispanic community. I also would like you to take in account that I am really proud for being part of the community and the collaboration when there's a disaster. I am part of the team that we distribute food cards in case of blackouts or any kind of emergency. Finally, I want to thank you all for your efforts to make these meetings inclusive for the Spanish-speaking community, for giving us the opportunity for our voices, to give us a voice, and to value our opinions. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Scott Thomason, and I live in American Canyon, and I am a member of the Sierra Club's Napa group. I'm also the past president of the American Canyon Community and Parks Foundation and a retired educator. I would like to strongly encourage this esteemed group when drawing up its budget for the upcoming fiscal year to include funding for the newly created Napa River Ecology Center that will be located along the wetlands of American Canyon. This facility formerly housed American Canyon's maintenance staff and materials. After several years of discussions and negotiations, the City of American Canyon has agreed to turn over this building to the Parks Foundation to use in creating year-round environmental education programs open to everyone in Northern California. Already, the federal government, with the support and guidance of Congressman Mike Thompson, has earmarked nearly $1 million for renovation and conversion of this building, and the City of American Canyon has also pledged $1 million to be used for this purpose. However, it will take another $4 million in public funding to complete the conversion of the existing building into an ecology center. So on behalf of the Sierra Club, I am asking the Board of Supervisors to set aside funds to support this conversion. When completed, the Napa River Ecology Center will showcase the importance of restoring and preserving the Napa River wetlands by presenting year-round environmental education programs under one roof. I also have included here, I have for you, a before and after handout of the facility as it exists now and how it will look when renovated. There's also a wealth of information on the Parks Foundation's website, Napa River Ecology Center organization. So I would encourage each of you supervisors to visit the website at your convenience. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening on behalf of the Napa River Ecology Center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it appropriate to give you each?
You can go right ahead to our
Thank you very much.
clerk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christopher DiNatale, and I'm the Executive Director of Arts Council Napa Valley. I came to you a few months back with the idea that progress moves at the speed of trust, and I thank you for continuing to make progress and build trust by opening up the budget process through evening meetings like this, and through the conscious decision to go beyond the numbers of the budget and also focus on the impact of your decisions. I feel in budget making we often get focused on the numbers that we miss celebrating the wins that come with new programs, partnerships, and improved and open community investment. In my world, your investment in the arts over the last year saw the first fully produced all-Spanish language stage production, a series of exciting cultural celebrations from the American Canyon Arts Association, and multiple collaborations, including DeRosa with Shakespeare Napa Valley, and Napa and St. Helena Historical Societies with Napa Television. This investment in the arts community is the lifeblood of our arts ecosystem and has solidified and grown our cultural offerings exponentially over its lifetime. Lastly, I would like to speak to the importance of language and representation in your budgeting process. Budget discussions sound overwhelming, and to be completely honest, really boring and a bit scary to most. So let's be creative and problem solvers to rebrand these discussions about where our government is investing over the next year to bring a more diverse and greater number of people to the process. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and take a break. We will be back at 7:55.
Just for the record, Chair, there's nobody on the line for public
Okay,
comment.
thank you. Is that okay? Yeah?
Chair Gallagher, would you like to get started? Okay. You're live. Go ahead.
Welcome back. I want to go ahead and continue to see if there's any additional public comment.
Good evening, Supervisors. Kelly Anderson Angwin. I was able to listen to the scanner, the LNU scanner, during the recent Crystal Fire, and it was, wow, reality TV. You could hear the voices, and you could hear the stress, and you could hear the worry, and they were landing, getting 100 people up there and equipment and aircraft. But I heard a request for 2 four-wheel drive water tenders. We need them now. And there was a long pause. They said, they'll be here tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe there's room in the budget for something like some four-wheel drive water tenders, since we know the bulk of the fires that we'll be fighting in the future will be in the hills. And that's my request. Thank you.
Thank you. And anything on the phone, Ms. Hoskins?
No one on the line.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to the board for additional questions, discussion. Supervisor Pedrosa.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you to all the staff that goes into preparing this budget. It's a lot of work. It's not just the hundreds of pages, it's the meetings that go on behind the scenes to prepare this in a very transparent way, so thank you for that. Just a question on, for Ms. Craig, and I always kind of ask this question in terms of the fixed cost of the county budget versus the revenue coming in. No different than our household income, right? How much money comes in, how much money goes out, and keeping an eye on that to make sure we can continue to afford, the quality of life that we all value. So based off my math, we're around 58% is fixed on employee wages and benefits. Is that accurate, Ms. Craig?
That is correct.
Okay. And how does that compare to just other counties in general?
So every county is different depending on what is the priorities within their general fund and how it is paid for. Some go as high as 60, 65%. And so ours is down in a very low 50%. So I think we are at the lower end. But if other departments have capital in their general fund or other places, then it's going to skew what that information looks like.
And I can appreciate us being on the low end, but in the real world, that wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to get a loan with that type of debt to income ratio. And I just say that to give perspective on it. And it also, kind of leads me to believe, we need to continue to invest in our people, right? This county works when you have talented people. But I also think we need to look at what other services and benefits can we provide as an employer of choice. Childcare, other benefits to make sure that we continue to attract the most talented people in the region. That isn't just a one-for-one, it's a different value. So again, I just say that because we need to think differently and creatively looking into the future in terms of how we continue to support our 1,600 employees, plus those that continue to join us. For Mr. Tudor, on the assessment, $49 billion, and it keeps growing at 3%, 7% last year, and I think that's just incredible. But one of the things that I have a question on, especially related to the ag economy, if you potentially see some vineyards not getting replanted, whether that's by choice or reacting to the grape market, what impact does that have on our budget if people don't replant their vineyards right away and they sit fallow for a year or two?
So assuming they pulled the vine, so there's a difference between abandoning a vineyard and leaving the vines there and tearing out the vines and really leaving the land fallow. So we've had instances where people have abandoned their vines and you can't tell they're abandoned. Aerial photos don't show they're abandoned. If they're abandoned, we will remove the value, just as if they tore them out. We will remove the value of the vines and the stakes and the wires and the drip irrigation. That is a relatively small component of all of the vineyards in the valley that we would see going fallow. And as you know, we're in another huge replanting cycle because those vines that were planted in the 80s late 80s to replace the phylloxera damaged vines are now reaching their life of somewhere between 25 and 30 years. So we're starting to see another replanting cycle. And as you know, what's going on in both the grape market and the wine market, there is some hesitation about doing major investments in that. Overall, however, one of the primary values of vineyard land is the land itself. And we're not going, if someone's leaving land that was proven vineyard land for years, fallow for 5 years, 2 years, we're not going to reduce the value of the land as if it weren't plantable, because it's still plantable. They just chose not to plant it. So a huge component of the value of the vineyards here is the land value of plantable land. When you see vineyards selling for over $500,000 per acre, that's reaching the French central vineyards. They sell land in Europe by the square meter, and we're now approaching square meter values when you get to 500,000 an acre. So the removal or the fallowing of land over a period of years is not going to have a significant impact on the budget as a whole.
I appreciate that, Mr. Tudor, and it's good to know because it just shows how fragile it can be. And just drawing from an experience that we had at the Great Wine Capitals, when there are certain jurisdictions reacting to the overproduction of grapes, there were some that were spraying their vineyards to go dormant. The French government was paying folks to tear their vineyards out, so it just shows how fragile that equilibrium is. In terms of some of the public comment that I want to react to, the connectivity issue, I'm not sure who brought it up. I thought that was a really interesting one with the coalition of, I think, the Bike Coalition, of looking at what role do we play. And that, when I was growing up, I could ride my bike to school. My kids won't ride their bike to school anymore, right? So it's those type of investments if we want to have a connected and walkable community. I acknowledge it's not just the county responsibility. This is working with our cities and public works. But I think that was a really salient point of, we envision this community that we all want to live in. We want to attract young families. And part of it is making sure people can ride their bike to school or work or vice versa. So just something to earmark around having a conversation. I don't think it's anything we can do from a budget standpoint, but I do think it's something we should have a conversation on at a later time. On the Skyline purchase, thank God. We've been working at this for years. And the fact that it's finally coming to fruition, I do want to thank Ms. Craig. I know you've been working very closely with the state on this. So the question on this is, we have the money budgeted for purchase. Are we looking ahead towards sustaining and improvements, or is that for a subsequent budget?
So yes and no. We have in here set aside $8 million. $7 million was what was anticipated based on the appraised value a couple of years ago when we did the appraised value, and that was with the understanding that Camp Coombs would not be included in that acquisition. And now we are moving forward, thanks to Senator Dodd, with legislation to allow Camp Coombs to be sold, and that's why we recommended an additional $1 million to be set aside, reserved for this. That is for land transactions. Those should come to the board here this summer. I stay in constant email communication with the Department of General Services and promise that I'm going to get a copy of the draft sale agreement on a weekly basis. It didn't happen last Friday, so it should come any day, and County Council and I will review it and bring it forward to the board. It will be for the majority of the acreage, the 800, without Camp Coombs, and then with success in Sacramento, then we should see Camp Coombs come later this summer. With that, we have sat down as departments to determine what that's going to look like as a change of our responsibilities. We understand that there is a very good working relationship already that we have with Skyline Citizens Association and the Open Space District in collaboration with the county. We anticipate to maintain that for the time being until we can come and sit with the board as owners to discuss what those future needs are going to be. We know that Public Works is reaching out to state agencies to learn what's going to be involved with not only the lakes and the dams, but any mitigation that comes along with that. But we are still waiting for more information to be able to fully understand that, and that'll be a future conversation.
Got it. Thank you, Ms. Craig. And then just lastly, I think someone made a comment around the executive summary, and I do want to echo that. I think one of the areas that I really get interested on is the data and the demographics of our community and how that changes. And I know this was just a snapshot, but looking at some historical and maybe projections, I think that would give us good context, because I think we received a presentation this year or last year around the aging community and how we're growing at a faster rate in our senior population. That's going to significantly impact this county and the services we provide. That doesn't get captured in this budget. So I do think that an executive summary would allow us to have something like that. And then lastly, when I look at the top property tax payers, I think Mr. Sanchez brought that up, to see what the wine economy is doing locally, you can't ignore that. That's a fact on paper. It shows what it's doing. So I appreciate you being very factual on what is happening in our community from a revenue standpoint. So again, to all the staff, thank you to our CEO for putting this together as well.
Thank you. Supervisor Gregory.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Craig and your team, for a great presentation. I do appreciate that you boiled down the budget from almost $1 billion but it's really $600 million. I think almost $1 billion sets maybe a different expectation for the community. But that's just sort of how it's sort of complicated, but thank you for that. Well, since it came up, I want to put in a plug for the Skyline Park Citizens Association. They run the park very well, and they've been really creative over the years of generating revenue. And I do believe that could just become sort of an enterprise fund and just fund itself if with their help. The question I'd like to ask is about the FEMA reimbursements. And Britt got me wondering about one of the challenges we have with typical FEMA reimbursement is we get reimbursed, but that money sits there. We can't touch it until we clear some audit window, which is 5 years. Does it vary?
It depends when the actual grant is deemed complete, and then an audit period after that. So it is multiple years.
So BRIC is a big dollar amount
Yes.
that we'll get reimbursed for, and then that's going to sit somewhere. Are we going to look at things a little differently given the scale of this thing? Meaning assess the risk of any sort of audit finding or clawback?
So those are conversations that we would want to have with the auditor controller and the board, but based on current policy, it would be set aside for many years before it would re-enter the circulation of operations.
Well, that's a lot of money sitting there, so I think this next board should really consider looking at it differently.
Okay.
That's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Cottrell.
Thank you. And this is a great thing about us all listening to each other up here. I appreciate Supervisor Pedrosa's point about the historical context and preservation, because I love the snapshot, and this is more than a snapshot, but having that background and projections. And Mr. Alsop, you mentioned, storm clouds in what could happen with VLF, and the more forecasting, even though we know some things won't come to pass, I think that's really helpful. And then agree with Supervisor Gregory about the FEMA set aside, and it makes sense, but that's a lot of money. So looking at how we could have conversations about what to do there would be interesting. I wanted to just go over a couple of the public comments. Appreciated Eve Kahn's point about not being clear on what the BAFA bond was, and I think that's the challenge. We have so much information here, but that's a good example of how just one more sentence or two of background, I think, would be helpful. And yes, agree also about seeing how we add in connectivity as a key metric when we're looking at road improvements overall. And then on COAD, great to hear all the comments on that. Mr. Alsop, I'll turn to you. We recently increased our investment in COAD. Is that correct?
Yes, Supervisor Cottrell. Last week, your board voted to give them $255,000 last week. I don't know much about it. Really appreciate the COAD people being here, and I would really like to learn more about your budget. I believe that contribution was for community liaison and cultural hubs for language inclusion and belonging is what the board provided funding for. And just in the context, it would be important for me, I guess, to understand as we work the next, to a final budget presentation, to understand, are you asking for another $100,000 on top of that, or is it for a different program? And I would be interested in understanding your overall, but is this your overall budget? Is this a overview of that? Okay, so in 2023-24, your total budget was 300,000. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so it was 255,000. Your board, there were Ms. Yasumoto. It was her program was tobacco funds. There were other groups, but they were one of those groups.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's good to know, and I really appreciate how much public comment we got in support of that. And then the other question I had, actually, it was, let's see, lots of notes here. A couple of comments just on the budget in general. I mean, I think it's a helpful, it's a planning document, it's a game plan. It tells us where we want to spend our money, where we'll be making the money. It's also, I think some of the metrics we're getting built in help us use it as a report card in some ways, but I think it should also function as something of a yearbook. And so I really appreciate the different snapshots we got, and I think we have a better view of each of the departments. So just kudos for the changes that have been made because of that. And I wanted to give a particular shout out to probation, because I thought their narrative and the bullet points really presented a good picture of what is happening in that department and how the challenges they have and where they're moving forward. So always great to have that example. And then one a substantive question maybe this is a question for Ms. Yasumoto, and this is kind of going back a little bit, looking at behavioral health. And we had just big increases, and then in the 23-24 adopted budget was a 57 million, and then that ended up being an estimated actual of 49 million. So I was wondering if we could just, and that's just personal education for me to understand what happened there in terms of also the use of the fund balance. So that's a question I can raise today. I don't need the answer right now. Maybe we could talk about that more offline. But in general, I'm really happy to see the direction this budget is going. I know next year at this time we would hope to have a strategic plan too. And I think I was happy to see places where our legislative platform, which is a set of policies that this board adopted, made it into the accomplishments and priorities. To give an example, I think in housing and homelessness, they talk about planning for how climate change is going to impact the work that they're trying to do for their service population. So I think seeing our legislative priorities make it into our budget book is a really good sign that we're putting our money where our mouth is. So I think that those are all my comments for right now. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to also thank the COAD volunteers and reps who showed up. Really, really important collaboration. And I believe, just for clarification, the MSA grant was for over 3 years. So I believe that's 255 over 3 years. And I believe that is for specific prevention activities, not their general operating. So we do about 25,000 for disaster response. So, and I too would love to learn more about just looking at that total budget and understanding better what the revenue sources are and how that's all made up. So thank you for that. I think that maybe I'll have more to say tomorrow. Supervisor Ramos, do you have anything else?
No, other than Supervisor Cottrell, I had the same question about behavioral health, and I had already had contacted the Director Yasumoto about it. I do think, I guess a generalized comment would be, when it comes to the use of fund balance, I think that warrants an explanation. You know, if we are using that fund balance, it's there, right, for use within the department, but you know, what is the change that has happened where the appropriations aren't matching up with the revenues that we need to tap into the fund balance? I think that helps to solidify, you know, is it a priority, a legislative priority, a policy priority that this board has directed. I definitely know in behavioral health, we've had significant changes, consolidations. I'm assuming a lot of this has to do with the consolidations of alcohol and drug and mental health services. And so those types of changes that we are doing are important. So that would just be my one additional comment, is when we do use that fund balance, tell the story. It's there to be used. We plan for it, for sure. That's why we have these sources available. But for us to be able to explain that within the narratives is always helpful.
The key change there in behavioral health is that they are transitioning to a new software platform for their submittals of reimbursements to the state. And so there is a delay in our request for reimbursement. So there is less revenue anticipated this fiscal year because of that transition. And so there's a delay that will come back to a portion next year, but there is also going to be a change in timing permanently. So instead of a 3 or 4 month timing difference for recognition of revenues, it may go up to 6 months in recognition of revenues. But right now it is exceeding 6 months, and that is why you see this draw in fund balance, is in order to be able to do this transition into the new programs with the state.
And, you know, I agree too that maybe I don't want to add another 100 pages to the budget book, but I do think that would be really, really helpful to put something in the narrative when we use fund balance. I agree with Supervisor Ramos. It's just for transparency's sake, and also just to, in general, give us a better understanding of what it is we're doing. But,
Understood.
you know, however briefly we can do it and make sense of it without adding another 100 pages. So, okay. All right. I think that is it. We are going to continue the public hearing until tomorrow morning, where we will reconvene Tuesday, June 11th, 2024 at 9 a.m. That is it. We have no closed session, and we will adjourn until tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Oh, and I'm adjourning in memory of Warren Winiarski. And the Judgment of Paris was in 1976. I stand corrected.